Welcome back, you guys. Fearless Front here doing a off-road Murray update. Today I'm doing a little work on the head, trying to port it a little bit and hopefully get the engine reassembled. Maybe even get it running. Who knows? Only time will tell. So here's what we got going on. On your left side, we've got the head for the motor that I'm currently putting on the Murray, and on the right is the head, the original head from the OHV that I drowned in a mud puddle. But on the left side here, you can see I've gone ahead and done some port work. I intentionally didn't really clean the carbon because I wanted you to see where I'd done my work. Right around this inner edge on both sides, and kind of on the top edge you can't really see, but when you rub your finger in there, I got rid of this this lip that's there. I just rounded it off real nice. On the exhaust side, I apologize if it's hard to see, I'll try to get it in the light here. You can see I rounded off the edge around where the valve stem comes through. Be careful not to go too far. You don't want to take a ton of metal off when you do this. It's all about just increasing flow, not so much increasing capacity. You can kind of see it better on that side, on the inside angle. And I also obviously went ahead and did the same thing for the upper edge on the exhaust as well. This one came out really nice. I don't polish. I don't really believe in polishing, because if you polish too much to like a mere finish, the air and fuel won't atomize as it flows down the intake track. So I like to leave it a little rough, because then it causes everything to kind of have turbulence, and that's actually what you want, so you get a better mixture. So I just pour it and I smooth it out with a nice drum sander. And this is what I mean by a drum sander. You can see this one's pretty well used as I just finished porting out this head. This little carbide cutter is what I use to do the majority of the work with. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus there. It's got little teeth on it, and you want to use this at a lower speed and go very slow. What you want to do is make sure you never touch your valve seats, and you don't want to come up above this little line you can kind of see where there's a dark layer of carbon, and then this seam. When you're porting, be careful not to come past that line. You don't want to, take too much meat away from there. If you make anything too thin, you're going to create hot spots, which will cause you to burn holes in your head. So you want to be very careful. You're not going to see a world of difference from this modification. You're not going to gain horsepower. I mean, I guess in a way you gain a little bit of horsepower, but you're not going to notice it. What you are going to notice is throttle response. And it's not going to be major, but it's enough to warrant doing it. I spent 10 minutes doing this. It's worth doing, it's cheap, it's the cost of a couple Dremel bits, and you're on your way. I'd done something similar to this on my flathead, and it made a really big difference because those flatheads don't breathe as well as the OHVs. You shave the eyebrow and you port the intake and exhaust ports on the block side. It does work fairly well. I definitely noticed an improvement, especially when I planed the flathead head down a little bit. Not too much, because you don't want any collision with the valve and the top of the flat head, but it does work and it is worth doing. It's also worth touching on, check your valve seats. These ones look really good. There's no problem areas. A problem area would look very dull. If it's shiny all the way around 360 degrees, then you're typically in good shape and you don't need to lap them. A lot of people lap them anyways while they have them apart, but I'm of the mind if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The valves themselves also look really good. They don't look warped, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw them back in. Like I said, if I need to take it apart and lap it again, it's not that big a deal, but right there it's kind of a little thin, but I think it'll be okay. So besides that, I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this thing, get it back together, and then start to put the carburetor intake manifold back on, the exhaust, everything else has got to get bolted back on. Fill it with oil, and we'll see if she runs. Alright, so we got the head on, I got the push rods in, I got the valve lash set. I did 5/1000ths on the exhaust valve, which is the top one, and 3/1000ths on the intake valve, which is the bottom one. I'm talking about is valve lash between the rocker arms and valve lash cap itself. Rotated it over a couple times, checked again. Actually had to adjust it again, so make sure you check it multiple times before you call it good. But the valve cover's on. Fairly new gasket. I replaced it not too long ago, but I'm going to go ahead and throw the exhaust on. That's pretty easy. And then we'll turn our attention over to the intake side of things. And then we're going to hook up throttle body, fuel pump, fuel lines, all that stuff. So we still got a little ways to go, but we're getting there. Alright, so as you can see, we are making progress. I got the intake manifold and Mikuni carburetor. Mikuni style carburetor, I should say. It's a Molkt, I think, is the actual name brand. I had to clean them out because, as you can see in this shot right here, it was very dirty from the swamp water that had gotten sucked in that killed the original motor. It was from the mud runs. But yeah, I got that cleaned out, swapped out. I removed the filter, cleaned that because it was really nasty. I also went ahead and replaced the coil. This is the one that was original to the Murray engine. I know it worked, so that's why I put it on there. And it also has this anti-heat, anti-chafing guard on it, and without removing the boot, that's really difficult to put on a new spark plug wire. So I went ahead and reset the air gap, which is I think 10/1000ths. But I looked it up and that got reset with the feeler gauge, so that's all good. Making progress. Now we've got the fuel system all plumbed. Got my return line to the tank. I got the feed line going through the filter. up to the fuel pump, and back down to the carburetor near where the return line is. And I've got the pulse line right here leading up to run the fuel pump itself, and obviously the blower housing is attached. And a weird side note, I found this weird cap. I think it's a wheel hub cap for like the back wheel of like a lawnmower. Oddly enough, fits perfectly onto my carburetor. So nothing will get in there until I get my snorkel assembly figured out, painted, and reinstalled with the new filter, or clean filter I should say. I still have to install my catch can. Alright, so fast forward a couple days and you can see I've been busy at work on this thing. First thing you might notice is the snorkel has now been reattached. I added the 90-degree PVC elbow, a small adapter, and then another small piece of PVC pipe. And that goes into this rubber adapter, which I've cut shorter because I needed less clearance in here. Very similar to like these guys. You'll find them in the plumbing section of a hardware store. This is the same type, but it's just kind of a slightly different shape, a different mold. But I bought a few. That would end up working out the best for me, so we made that work. You might also tell that the catch can has now been replumbed back in. That comes down from the PCV, pulls up through, and taps into the vacuum line that runs the pulse for the fuel pump. So the fuel system is now completely done. The PVC system is completely done. The snorkel is hooked up. The air filter I went with is one of the original ones. It's the K&N style, which got really, really muddy, so I ended up cleaning it. I do actually need to pull it back out and oil it. This is the other filter that was originally bolted to the air cleaner, or I mean the carburetor rather. It's a sponge filter, it's all right. I would have needed to build another adapter on the other end of the PVC pipe to reduce it down to fit this. I figured that filter worked, so why not just use that? These sponge filters are great. Again, just put a little bit of 10W30 on there and just kind of squeeze the oil in so they catch more dust. Besides that, this thing's pretty much buttoned up, ready to go. The only thing I haven't done yet are my side panel and bottom panel. I don't call it a skid plate because it doesn't really offer any skid protection, especially to the rear end. It's just a belly pan and the piece that goes in between the wheel well and the tires, so it keeps mud from being thrown onto my belt system in the water or in the snow. One other little thing that I did that you may not have noticed is I put the heat shield back in around the cooling fins below the blower housing. I got one from a friend of mine and it actually didn't end up fitting. It was slightly different. It was a little taller, so I had to fabricate the tangs back in there myself and then bolt it through in the bottom. Not a big deal. Still to work with the snips, the tin snips, but this should help keep the cylinder head a lot cooler. I always ran these motors without the heat shield in place because I'd always take them off because they're always caked in grass and I would just never put them back on. But in my older years, I realized how valuable air cooling is to an air-cooled motor. So I decided to put it back on, maybe get a little bit more life out of the engine. I got one more little mod surprise for you guys. I'll post another video before we actually get this thing running. It should be ready to go. It's got oil. It just needs gas, battery, and turn the key, or push the button, I should say. Those of you that follow me on social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook, probably already know what I'm talking about for the next mod. So stay tuned for that. That'll actually be coming up real quick. I want to get this thing done, out, and ready for the trails before I really need it. I want to have it when I need it. So thank you for watching the video. Stay tuned for the next little surprise modification. And then I think the video after that, we'll be taking this baby for its first ride. So stay tuned.